Hi, I'm Axel Luther and I work for SAP in the area of user assistance. And in this vlog and in some upcoming vlogs I want to talk about the topic multimedia production in user assistance. So perhaps first of all, it's a good idea to define a little bit what multimedia means. It's of course a combination of different formats, so a multi-coded way of content, which can be that you have video content, image content, audio, text, and all this comes together and is getting into one piece of multimedia content or multimedia asset. And because of the different formats, it's also multimodal, which means you actually touch various senses of the consumer of this content. So he's not just seeing it like in the form of a text, he might also hear it, and if it's interactive content, he might even feel it and experience it by actually touching it or trying it out, depending how the interactivity works in your specific formats. So after this very basic definition of what multimedia is, it's perhaps a good idea to also see where the benefits are. Okay, coming to the fact of multimedia content is easier to consume and also easier to remember. And easier to consume, it's basically because the human brain is trained over thousands of years to process visual information. And this was always very essential because in the beginning, imagine 10,000 years ago, you walk through the prairie and suddenly you see an angry wolf and you immediately have to understand the situation. There's no time to actually start to read something, to find out all the facts about the situation, if you can escape or if you should attack. No, you have to make an immediate decision, otherwise you might be dead at the end of the day. At the same time, if you see a more friendly animal, you again interpret this immediately. So you know that this is now perhaps something that you can actually hunt and that you can have for dinner. And this you can see everywhere. So when people get visual information and audio information, they typically can interpret this extremely fast. And there are calculations which say that it's about 16,000 times faster to interpret a visual information. Like you see an image, and on this image there's a tree and a bird, and you immediately know what's on the image. If you have to read all this, a description of the tree, a description of the bird, the shape and the colors, this simply takes much longer. And now, of course, we are not talking about walking through the prairies and having wolves in front of us or a possible dinner in front of us. But for UA, this also means if you provide something in a visual form and perhaps even in a moving visual form, which is not necessarily a video, but which can also be an animated graphic, for example, people immediately get the content. So here you see an example of a car engine. And you can already see that this is quite complex, and this image is describing the 4 different phases of a car engine when it's running, so-called 4-stroke engine. And with this picture and some additional text, you can immediately tell the story. And people can look at this, on the one side quite complex, but on the other side also understandable graphic. They see the moving parts, they see how everything works together. And now imagine you have to describe all this just with pure text. This would take pages, and it's still not guaranteed that when people read this text, that at the end of the day they have a clear picture in mind how this engine looks like and how it works, and what the different parts of these engines are doing in these 4 different phases of the normal run of this engine. And this is of course a very typical example that can be used in user assistance, and where you clearly see that you have a great advantage when you produce not just a text, but also add some multimedia content to the text. Okay, coming to the fact that content is easier to remember when you actually provide it in a multimedia format. And here some facts. If you have a piece of information, if you produce a text and you give people this text and they read it, and 3 days later you ask them about the content, they will only know about 10% of what they read 3 days ago. If you give them a visual story, a multimedia content like a video or like an interactive graphic or an animated graphic, it's already 6 times more. And when it's interactive, so when they can actually touch it or try it out or play with it, it's even 9 times more. This you also see when you look at these guys who have this crazy talent to actually, for example, look at a pile of cards which is shuffled just for something like 2 minutes, and then they can repeat the order without any mistakes. And what they do is they don't remember the facts. They don't remember, okay, the first thing was heart 8 or whatever. They tell themselves a story. So they actually turn the cards into a story. And this story helps them to then walk through the pile of cards and then really repeating each and every card in the right order. So visual storytelling is essential if you want people to remember things. And that's, of course, one of the very strong benefits of multimedia content. So why is multimedia content more attractive? And first thing is you can ask yourself, or you can look at your own history or your own youth and just remember how it was when you started to read, when you learned how to read. Your first textbooks, they were no textbooks, they were actually picture books, and under these pictures there was a little text information. So you had a picture of a mouse and then you just saw the word mouse. And with this you learned to read, you associated the text with the picture, but just having a book with no pictures, just having the word mouse would probably be so unattractive for you as a child that you would not like to read it. And the older you get, the less pictures you had in your book, so after a while you might even have started to read complete books. But even now and today, I'm quite sure that you find it more attractive and more interesting to not just read something, but to also have some visual information in combination with the text. And it's of course a big difference if you have an exciting novel that you will read in 3 nights completely, and it doesn't matter if it's 600 pages, but if you have a 600-page document explaining complicated processes in your software or in your, I don't know, digital camera or your car, and it's pure text information, you might not find it very attractive to actually go through these 600 pages. And then we could also see this when we looked in the access statistics of our software documentation. We selected one product which was on the market for something like half year, and we checked how often were the documents clicked in this half year. And the group of customers was about 20,000 people. And the average click rate on a text-based document was 47, which is not that much. And a third of the content, of the written content, was not used at all. At the same time, when we looked at the interactive graphics that we had in the same product, it was already 3 times more. When we looked at the how-to videos that we had in this product, already 6 times more. Although the same information was also available in text form and in how-to documentation, but the videos got 6 times more clicks. And videos we had outside the software in YouTube, which were more kind of promotional videos, introducing specific parts or topics of the software. This was even 20 times more. And the same happens in these video channels. So here you see the statistics from YouTube, and over the last years, the numbers of uploads were really tremendously increasing. And I mean, people are not doing videos just to do a video. They do this because people are actually using it, which basically means that this content is also more and more used, and you probably do the same thing. So you might go to YouTube to find some funny stuff there, but very often, at least I can talk for myself, I go to YouTube to find how to do something. So there are great how-to videos on everything: how I can play guitar, how I can use my camera, how I can use my software, how I can bake a cake, whatsoever. So someone is doing the effort, is producing such a video, and I'm the lucky guy who can then consume the content. And what we also did is we asked a group of young people, they were working at SAP at that time, just starting their studies or starting to work for SAP. And we asked them, okay, how do you onboard on your software? Because we wanted to find out what's the best way to support these young guys. And almost no one was doing any upfront learning. So learning content that we provided was not used, or they will not use it. And also a very small group was reading the help documentation, only if they really had to. But if they went into a problem by using the software, it was not necessarily the help content that we provided where they first looked at. So very often they go to forums, or they go into a video channel like YouTube and do the exact same thing there. In forums they ask questions and get answers, but in YouTube they actually find a how-to video or an explanation video explaining them how to handle this software. As I said, not just SAP software, but all kinds of software. So this clearly shows that the content is attractive, people like to consume it. But we also always say you can't now switch into a complete multimedia production form. It makes no sense to replace each and every text with any form of multimedia. So the idea is that you still continue to have your text content, and in addition you also have multimedia content, and only the combination really works. And we can see this here also in this one concrete example. So what you see here is a so-called multimedia book, which is basically a combination of a classical ebook with lots of multimedia content in it. And this makes the whole thing, at least for me, so much more attractive, because these multimedia elements are used to give me, for example, a way to actually navigate through the book. So I'm not having a table of contents with lots of chapters. I have these bubbles here where I can actually move around or push them around, can see my areas of interest, and then if I click on a bubble I get to a more detailed page. Interactive graphics can also be used on these pages then to provide some deep dives into a complex topic. I find videos that tell stories in 1 or 2 minutes instead of having to read lots of text. And the whole multimedia book is actually describing what an area in our company is doing, the so-called Innovation Network Center. If you would put this in a pure text form, that's probably something like 1,000 pages of pure text. And you have this on your desk and you might start to read it, but it's quite likely you will not read the entire thing. You also will not use the entire multimedia book, but it's so much nicer to actually open this thing and to select the topics you want to look at, and then get the information in all different forms and not just in pure text. So for me that's a great example of a combination on how you can actually use, on the one side, the text part with all the benefits you have with text, like easy production, allowing all levels of detail, but then you can also use the multimedia content to enrich the whole thing and bring in the attractivity of multimedia content, and also the fact that with multimedia content you can explain things easier, people can remember things easier, and the overall experience is much better than having just a pure format, which actually applies for both. Pure text is not so attractive, pure multimedia is also not so attractive. So ideally you have both, and you can either combine it in one asset like this multimedia book, or you just provide them side by side. Okay, coming to the last advantage I want to talk about, which is for me a very important factor as well, and that's the job enrichment for you yourself as a content provider or a UA developer. And if you're producing just one format, after a while you know all the tools, it's more or less then always the same thing. You tell your story, but the way how you do it is not really changing a lot, and this might be after a while somehow a bit monotonous. But if you then extend the scope of what you do, if you suddenly learn how to produce a video, how to film people, how to do animations, how to put everything together, combining it with sound that you also recorded, how to do graphics, and whatever, this is of course a much higher diversity of different tasks. And I can tell you from my own experience, working in this multimedia area is also quite a fun part. I mean, you're really directly in touch with people when you're filming them, when you're getting the information from them. To a certain extent you also have this when you do pure text production, but with multimedia it's simply, it's a nicer, or it's a broader scope. And also your value as a UA developer is of course increasing. So when you go out trying to find the next job, and if you can then list all these skills that you have to actually produce not just text but also multimedia content, I'm quite sure that your chances to get a good job in the next company is much higher. So this was the introduction into multimedia and user assistance. I hope you like the idea, and you see all the benefits that you can actually achieve. And if you want to learn more about this, there will be some more vlogs coming in the next weeks, which will then focus more on really concrete and specific things like how can I do my videos, how can I produce graphics or interactive graphics, and hope you will see us again then. Okay, bye bye.